Throughout history, man has left great landmarks of culture to mark his path. These are the places where great peoples and ideas were born. The Parthenon, the Roman Forum, the Colosseum, the Great Wall of China, Palace at Versailles, the White House, the Eiffel Tower, the Taj Mahal, and Termite Terrace. Yes, Termite Terrace. For just as Abraham Lincoln was born in a rude log cabin in Illinois, so too the simple clapboard building called Termite Terrace was the humble birthplace of one of the world's most beloved comedians, Bugs Bunny.
Any Looney Tunes fan who's ever studied their history has, at some point, imagined what it must have been like to work on those legendary cartoons, whether at the studio in Burbank, Leon Schlesinger Productions, or that legendary shack that led to the Looney legacy, Termite Terrace. The story of a barely held together building full of young, bright-eyed artists just trying to get the best laughs on screen absolutely begs to be interpreted as a movie. Who wouldn't want to see a movie, maybe narrated by the animated characters, about the creative energy that went into creating what is now Warner Brothers' animated legacy? Well, apparently the answer to that question is Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers doesn't want to see that movie, and apparently their vote counts. Yeah. What's up, docs and docettes? Trevor Thompson, the self-appointed Looney Tunes critic, and I recently saw this piece of footage here. It's director Joe Dante talking about basically the events that led to Looney Tunes back in action, and turns out even before Space Jam, he was gearing up to make a movie about Termite Terrace, a movie of the same name, basically.
One of them would be Termite Terrace, which is a project I had at Warner Brothers. Chuck Jones was a friend of mine, and we worked with him on a story about his days at Warner Brothers in the early 30s, working for Leon Schlesinger and making Looney Tunes. And what we did was we talked extensively to Chuck, and we also brought all the existing living animators from that period together at Warner Brothers, had a sort of a luncheon for them, and ran a lot of their cartoons in 16mm, many of which they hadn't seen since forever. And we got their comments on their own work, which was cool. And anecdotes flowed, stories that they may not have told for a number of years. And all of which Charlie Haas, the writer, tried to work into the screenplay for Termite Terrace. And Warner's really was not, at that time, that interested in their past. And they were much more interested in their future. And their future was Space Jam. The idea of putting the cartoon characters together with a big sports star was much more appealing to them than doing a period picture, God forbid, a period picture, for an audience that doesn't remember anything that happened before 10 years. But it just didn't pan out, and there were really no attempts to revive it, because once Space Jam was a huge hit, they decided that was the direction that they wanted to go with these characters, which gave me a certain amount of pause when it came time to do Looney Tunes back in action, because they were sort of on this kick of, it doesn't matter what the characters used to act like, they should act like their contemporary characters today. And in the meantime, they had done Animaniacs, which is a sort of an offshoot, and they'd done a series with junior versions of the cartoon characters when they were babies. And there were a lot of interesting things being done within that format, because there were a lot of artists and writers who loved those old movies and would, put in as much stuff into those things as possible. But in terms of going back to the roots, and particularly doing a picture that has period cars in it, that just wasn't in the cards with them.
Well, it is of course a shame, but I still don't think a movie like that ever will get made. However, me and Sean McBee Me and my Shawnee McBee. The video wrangler for these Looney Tunes videos, and an avid Looney Tunes fan himself. He and I have been casting the Termite Terrace movie since the days of high school. So here now is my current cast list for a Termite Terrace movie. Number 1, Rudy Ising, portrayed by Timothy Oliphant. Obviously, a major factor in my decision-making is look, and Oliphant as well as Rudy have a Weasley kind of handsomeness about them. The other reason I think Timothy Oliphant could play Ising is because Oliphant could play anything. I mean, there's a reason they call him Oliphantastic, you guys. He's amazing. Number 2, Hugh Harmon, portrayed by James Franco. Harmon was the more traditionally handsome of the two, and in some ways he was the less technically minded. I don't know about you, but when I look at Franco, I don't exactly see a locksmith. I see a guy who could be outwitted by his TiVo. Number 3, Uncle Walt, portrayed by Tom Hiddleston. Walt Disney wasn't a big part of the story of Termite Terrace. Nay, he went on to start some other long-since-forgotten animation studio. But since his part is small, I thought, why not spoil ourselves and go with a great film actor who was theatrically trained, but I just don't see Tom Hanks pulling off Walt Disney. So, I go with Hiddleston. Number 4, Friz Freleng, portrayed by Danny DeVito. Mainly I picked Danny because of the recent death of Mini-Me Vern Troyer. Get it? Friz was small. Number 5, Leon Schlesinger, portrayed by Paul Giamatti. Now, this is a serious one. Leon would have to be a pretty big part of the movie, and he'd have to be big and theatrical while still looking terrible in a hairpiece. While Giamatti didn't wear skull cover in Private Parts, the Howard Stern biopic, he displayed a great ability to be an authority figure to some while being ignored by others. And yet, in Sideways, he can command a room. Leon was hated by some and respected by others, and a good dichotomy like that could be ruined by a bad or even merely serviceable performance. But Paul Giamatti would deliver.
How about that? How about that? Howard Stern, huh?
Number 6, Tex Avery, portrayed by Bobby Moynihan. I gotta be honest, man, I landed on this one merely because Tex was young when he was involved with Schlesinger, and my pick for many years was Jack Black. But Jack's too old now, and I don't think Jonah Hill quite has the right quality for it, so I like Bobby Moynihan, I like SNL, and actually, to hell with him. I want Tex to be played by Leslie Jones. Number 7, Frank Tashlin, portrayed by Fred Armisen. Tish Tash had an unusual look, and was the consummate artist in many fields, all of which were in service to comedy. And in many ways, that same sentence also describes Armisen. He also did the voice of Speedy Gonzales, so it'd be pretty cool. Number 8, Bob Clampett, portrayed by Mark Normand. One element about my personal life that this channel, and moreover these Looney Tunes videos, don't tend to highlight as much is that I do stand-up, and I'm a big fan of it as well. Mark Normand is a hilarious comic who's very upbeat, with a wicked sense of humor, and on top of that, the f***er's handsome. But we'll take care of that for the older Clampett years when we get to see him in a Roy Orbison wig. Number 9, Chuck Jones, portrayed by Jesse Plemons. Anyone watching good TV these days knows who Plemons is. He was on Breaking Bad and Fargo, and most recently, the latest season of Black Mirror. I mean, just look at him. I see it, don't you? Number 10, Robert McKimson, portrayed by Sean Hayes. While I was never a fan of Will and Grace, you don't have to be to know that Megan Mullally is a comedic acting force of nature. The same is true of her Grace co-star, and even though the premise of the film baffled me beyond further viewings, the truth is, the Three Stooges movie housed 3 great performances, and one of them was Hayes as Larry Fine. But one of the greatest types of dramatic acting is, actually, subtlety, and McKimson's personality was he was dapper and markedly timid, and I think Sean Hayes could pull that off beautifully. You can't do broad if you can't do subtle. Plus, for too long, he's been playing a character that doesn't do broads. Number 11, Mel Blanc, portrayed by Simon Helberg. Not to sound like a mainstream hipster, but I was into Big Bang Theory before it was cool. And I saw Simon on it in those first few seasons and thought, oh hey, that's the dude from Dr. Horrible. But you know that whomever plays Mel has to be able to be versatile as a performer and a voice artist.
You're playing D&D. You're playing D&D. This whole apartment is playing D&D.
And while he can do impressions and act really well, yes, Helberg isn't on Mel's level, but as a performer, I think he could engage us all as the man of 1,000 voices. Number 12, Mike Maltese, portrayed by Pete Davidson. You know, this list is starting to make me realize that I watch SNL way more than I care to admit, but actually Pete's on my radar, again, for my list of favorite stand-ups. He may be a little too young to play Maltese, but the characteristics to get across in Mike are a smart, joke-writing wise guy from New York, and Colin Quinn's way too old. For a lot of things. He's brilliant. He's brilliant, but he's finished. Brilliant and finished. That's the name of his new one-man show. Number 13, Ted Pierce, portrayed by John Hamm. Look, if you know the history, you know the stories. Ted was a ladies' man first, gag man second. He always had a date, was always witty, and very good looking. If you got someone better than John Hamm to play that, I say you're mad, man. Number 14, Carl Stalling, portrayed by Joel McHale. Okay, look, I originally wanted to put in Bill Murray, because look at that smirk. That is a Bill Murray smirk, you guys. But at this point, Bill's too old to do it, much like Colin Quinn. And while Joel doesn't look like Bill, he does, oddly, somewhat resemble Stalling. I don't know how tall Stalling was, but I do know his voice carried quite a bit, as does McHale's. You can hear Stalling pretty sharply on these old cues.
This is part 7, production number 1425. 5, boys.
Number 15, Treg Brown, portrayed by Zach Braff. Anyone who can't connect Braff's JD from Scrubs, a character whose head is constantly in the clouds and imagining up new scenarios, to this piece of documentary, true-to-life footage of Brown, hard at work, trimming sound effects on film and splicing them in, well then don't see the film. Because you don't see the film, man. Number 16, June Foray, portrayed by Tara Strong. Ditto on the thing I just said about if you don't see it. And finally, number 17, B. Benaderet, portrayed by Sarah Silverman. Benaderet and Silverman have a lot in common. They're young, beautiful women with harpy Jewish voices who make the world laugh and who owe Joan Rivers a debt of gratitude, even if for different reasons. Do you agree with my list? Who would you cast as the major and even minor players at Schlesinger's? Would you include the move to Burbank in the movie? All of these questions should be answered below in the comments. I would love to hear what you guys think. Tell me what you think of my list, and I'd love to hear from you. But anyway, that is going to do it for this video. I'm Trevor Thompson, the self-appointed Looney Tunes critic, and until next time, dance on, folks.
Walt Disney help me to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Termite Terrace, rock, rock, rock. Termite Terrace, rock, rock, rock. Termite Terrace, rock, rock, rock. Termite Terrace, Termite Terrace.